Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we are going to break down one of the most fundamental building blocks of Python, functions. Seriously, if you want to write clean, efficient, and really powerful code, this is where it all starts. So let's start with a problem that I guarantee every single one of us has faced. You know the feeling, right? You solve a little piece of a puzzle, and then a few minutes later, you find you need that exact same solution again, and then again. Well, that repetition is exactly what functions were born to destroy. All right, so here's our game plan for this explainer. We're going to start with the why. Why functions are so awesome. Then we'll get into the nuts and bolts of how they're built, how they handle data, and finally, how to use them like a total pro. Okay, let's dive right in. At its heart, programming is all about solving problems efficiently. And functions are probably one of the most important tools for doing just that. They're built on this core philosophy called DRY, which stands for don't repeat yourself. So here's the main idea, and it's super simple. A function is basically like a named recipe. You write down the steps just one time, you give that recipe a name, and from then on, whenever you need to do that task, you just call it by name. You don't have to write out all the steps every single time. It keeps your code so much cleaner and easier to follow. Now, let's get into the actual syntax, how you write one of these things. And the best part? Python makes this incredibly simple. Once you learn this basic pattern, you'll be building functions all over the place. Just think of it like a simple 4-part checklist. You start with def to say, hey Python, I'm making a function. Then you give it a clear descriptive name. The colon and the indentation that follows, that's the block where all the work happens. And finally, you have the optional return statement, which is how the function can give a result back to you. That's the blueprint right there. Okay, this is where functions really start to get powerful. They go from being these simple static tasks to incredibly dynamic tools. And it's all because we can pass data into them, which lets one function handle all kinds of different situations. This shows the two main ways you can give a function its inputs. With positional parameters, order is everything. The first thing you pass in goes to the first parameter, the second to the second, and so on. But with keyword parameters, you actually name each argument. So you can pass them in any order you want, which is super flexible. And check this out. This is a fantastic trick for making your functions more forgiving. You can set a default value for a parameter. What this does is it makes that parameter totally optional. If whoever is using your function doesn't provide a value, your code won't crash. It'll just fall back and use the default you already set up. It's like a built-in safety net. Now, this is a really common problem, right? What if you're building a function that needs to add up a bunch of numbers? Maybe sometimes it's 2 numbers, but other times it could be 10 or even 100. You don't want to have to define 100 different parameters. Well, don't worry, Python has a really clever way of handling this. The secret is that little asterisk. When Python sees *args inside a function definition, it's like a special instruction. It means, hey, if there are any extra positional arguments left over, just scoop them all up and bundle them together into a single variable called args. Just look at this add numbers example here. We can call it with 2 numbers or 4 or 20. It doesn't matter. All those numbers just get funneled into the function, and inside, args becomes a tuple holding all of them, all ready for you to work with. It's so flexible. Okay, so that handles a variable number of positional arguments. But what about named arguments? Well, that's where double asterisk KWGRS comes in. That double asterisk tells Python to do something similar. Collect any extra keyword arguments and pack them all into a dictionary for you. This is just so useful for functions that need to handle a bunch of optional data. You can pass in a name, an age, a city, literally any piece of information you want. The function doesn't need to know about them ahead of time. Kwargs just catches them all and organizes them into a nice clean dictionary. So we've gotten pretty good at putting data into a function, but a function that just does something without giving you a result back isn't always what you need. We need a way to get the final computed value out, and that is the entire job of the return statement. The moment a function hits a return statement, it stops everything it's doing and sends that value back to whatever called it. You can then catch that result in a variable or pass it to another function, whatever you need to do. And here's a key thing. If you don't have a return statement, your function will automatically return a special value called none. Now check this out. What I find really cool is how Python lets you return multiple values. You don't have to do anything fancy. You just list them after the return keyword separated by commas. Python automatically bundles them up, and then you can unpack them directly into multiple variables.
It's a super clean and very Pythonic way to get several results from just one function call.
All right, let's quickly touch on a really crucial idea for writing bug-free code. See, not all variables are created equal. Where you define a variable actually determines where it can be seen and used, and this whole concept is called scope. Here's the most important thing to get. Functions create their own little private world. Any variables you create inside a function have a local scope. They live and die inside that function. And honestly, that's a good thing. It's a safety feature, really. It stops functions from accidentally messing with each other's data. Now, you can access and change global variables from inside a function, but it's usually best to avoid that to keep your code easy to predict. Okay, time for the grand finale. Let's see how all of these concepts we've talked about, parameters, default values, args, double args, and return, can all come together to build one seriously powerful and flexible function. Just look at this function signature here. It requires a name, it has a default value for age, it uses star args to collect any number of hobbies you throw at it, and it uses double asterisk kwargs to gather up any extra contact info. This is the exact kind of pattern you would see in a real-world application. And this just shows so perfectly how it all works when you call it. Alice goes straight to the name parameter. The number 25 overrides the default age. Reading and coding get collected into that hobbies tuple. And then the email and phone number get neatly packed into the contact info dictionary. Every single argument finds its perfect home, just seamlessly. So what are the big takeaways here? If you remember nothing else, remember these 5 things. Functions are for reusability. Parameters make them dynamic. Args and double kwargs give them that ultimate flexibility. Return is how you get results back. And understanding scope is what keeps your code clean and safe from weird bugs. So I'll just leave you with this thought. The real magic of functions happens when you start applying them to your own work. Think about the code you write day to day. Where's the repetition? Where are you copying and pasting? Because that is your first target for creating a powerful, reusable function.